Hello, and welcome to episode 155 of the Pos-cast with Rabbi Shmuel Posner, myself, Seth Talman. Rabbi, how are we doing today?
Baruch Hashem. We have to first say, Ushavi Gut Moyed. We have to sing. V'samachta b'chagecha v'Yisrael. Okay, this
I
hurts
was telling my
so.
dad about that on the other day. The years ago at BU, we had done one of our hakafas lasted for like an hour and a half or something ridiculous because we were singing that repeatedly. I mean, we must have sung. I can't imagine how many times we went through the whole loop of it, walking the Torah scrolls from the Chabad
Yes, down
house to the
Commonwealth
GSU.
Avenue. So I couldn't take a picture because I didn't want it to be uncomfortable. But a family of parents with, I believe it was 6 kids, Kanai just walked into the Chabad house with curly payas, totally shaven heads, black velvet yarmulkes, like probably I don't know, the oldest is 16, and every 2 years, I guess, there's one going down, with one in a carriage. And this came this morning. I got a call on the answer sheet from a woman. She said, "We're coming to Boston. Is there a place we can stop just like to eat? We'll bring our own food. Can you call me back and let me know?" So I called back, and her husband answered the phone. He said, "Yeah, we're taking a flight. We're going to land at 2:30, and we just need a place to go. And we bring our own food. We'll be able to to eat and everything. And then we're going to have a flight back at 6:00." I said, "Why are you coming?" He said, "Because, how many times can you go to Six Flags or whatever amusement park?" He said. So the kid's never been on a plane. So we're gonna fly to Boston, and then we're gonna fly back to New York, and that's going to be the Chol trip. As you know, if you don't know, that's like the biggest thing kids look forward to, because during Chol Hamoed, Sukkot and Pesach, the intermediate days that are on Shabbos. So what do you do? So everybody goes. That's a big thing. You go on trips. So if you went, for example, you went to Boston. In Boston, you go like the Science Museum. It's full of frum Jews. And if you live in New York, a 4-hour trip to a different city, that's alone a trip. Sometimes they'll stay overnight somewhere, and then they start asking, where is Minyan for Shachas, Mincha, Ma'ariv, that type of thing. This is like a first in all my years I've been here. I've never heard of such a thing. The trip is literally to fly to Boston, spend. I know they got here a half an hour ago. They rented a car. They got a van for all the kids, the whole family. And I guess I don't know when they have to go back. If they have a 6:00 flight, they'll leave like in a half an hour.
At least.
And I am not exaggerating. They came with a full size suitcase and 2 carry-on suitcases. And the guy just opened. And they came literally 15 minutes ago. So I just show them where they can sit and everything. And they opened it up, and they bought I don't know what they brought with them. How much food can you bring? It's so funny. It's the first time I've seen anything like that. But it makes sense. The kids have excitement. They went to the airport, they went on a plane, off a plane. Anyway, that's what's going on in that world. Yeah. Okay. So what do we have today? I think we're going to start a regular feature on the Pos-cast called Dogs in Torah. I got more about dogs today. Because on Shabbos I was talking to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Shaike Lerner in Brookline. And I told him about the whole thing about, dog in shul and the Rebbe and this, and he thought for a minute. He said, yeah, he remembers reading that discussion. Then he says, I think the Rebbe once spoke about something else about dog, and he mentioned it to me, and I looked it up in this very handy book here. It's called. It's a Hebrew book. It's a thick book. You can see how big it is. It's a fat book, and what it has is this. So basically, it's an index of all the Rebbe's teachings. but has it by topic. So all the whatever's the edited talks, not edited. So you look up any subject, you can find different places where it talks about it. So I looked up Kelef, dog, and found what Rabbi Lerner was talking about, which is actually a talk that the Rebbe gave on Achron Shal Pesach, which is pretty fascinating. We're talking about it this Shabbos, which is Pesach, and the Rebbe spoke about it in 1979. The Rebbe spoke about it in a talk he gave. So there would be a big farbrengen at the end of Yontif, like at the end of every Yontif, Rosh Hashanah, Simchas Torah, Pesach, Shavuos. There would have a farbrengen the last day before it got dark. It would start. It would last into the night, and then we would give out Kaishel Brach after benching and Havdalah would pour, from his cup. People line up, and the whole big. It was a thing. It would go on for 3-4 hours. There would stand there, and then there would be what yeshiva students, Baruchim would had places to stand. They would watch it, and they would sing the Gunim the whole time. Many times Rebbe would encourage the singing. It was a wonderful experience to be at, and to get the wine from the Rebbe as well. I'm sure you've seen pictures. I took our in the early years that I was here. I took students a couple of times. Took our children who were very young then. You hold a cup, even a baby. You hold a cup for the baby, and the Rebbe would pour in. So at this Achron Shal Pesach, now we have to understand that Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach, is very special. And we talk about Pesach. What is the whole idea of Pesach? The Jews coming out of Egypt, right? But even in the first paragraph of the Haggadah, we talk about this is the bread that our ancestors ate. This year we're slaves, next year we'll be free, this year we're here, next year we'll be in Yerushalayim. So immediately when you start the Haggadah, you're already talking about the fact that the Jews were in exile and they were freed. We're in exile, we'll be freed. So we find that right away, that theme is right away there. And in fact, we even have the two parts of the Seder. The first part of the Seder talks about exodus from Egypt. The second part, after benching, is talking more about the future redemption. That's when we open the door and we say, that Hashem should get rid of all our enemies. Similarly, the first days of Pesach are more about exodus from Egypt, and the second days of Pesach are more about coming to Moshiach. In fact, the Haftarah for the 8th day of Pesach is literally about Moshiach coming. So we see that that's the theme of the day. So that's the focus of the last 2 days of Pesach, Achron Shal Pesach. And so in this talk that the Rebbe gave in 1979, the Rebbe asked why you have there's 7 days to Pesach, right? So the first days of Pesach are the first days of Pesach. The 7th day is called Shvi'ah Shal Pesach, called the 7th day of Pesach, which is very important on its own, because the 7th day of Pesach is when the sea was split. So people ask, why is Pesach 7 days? First of all, who knows? That's where Hashem wanted it to be. It's a full week. But it really fits in well with the narrative of going out of Egypt, because when the Jews left Mitzrayim, the Egyptians chased after them. So it means they weren't completely annihilated or decimated if they were still able to chase after them. And even when they came to the sea, the Jews were saying, maybe we should jump in, maybe we should go back. It wasn't so clear what was going to happen. So it means the influence of the Egyptians was still upon the Jews, even after they left Egypt. Once it went into the sea, and the Jews came out, the sea split, and the Jews came out, and the Egyptians drowned, then they knew that that's it. Egypt is over, they're finished. Okay. So that's Shvi'ah Shal Pesach. Makes sense that the 7th day of Pesach is the conclusion of Yetzias Mitzrayim, exodus from Mitzrayim. Then you have the last day of Pesach, in exile anyway. Last day of Pesach is called Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach. It's not called Shmini Shal Pesach, it's called the 8th day of Pesach. It's called the last day of Pesach. It's almost like you have 7 days, then there's this other day that it's attached to it, which of course it is, because in outside of Eretz Yisrael, we have an extra day. But the fact that it has its own name, it's called Achron Shal Pesach, it's a whole different thing on its own. And so the Rebbe says, well, why is, and especially, we know that Chabad has the custom, Lubavitch has a custom, that the last meal on the last day of Pesach is called the Feast of
Moshiach.
Exactly, the Mashiach Suda. So we have the Mashiach Suda. So why is the Mashiach Suda connected to the last day of Pesach and not to Shvi'ah Shal Pesach? And Shvi'ah Shal Pesach is a Torah ordained day of Yontif, and Achron Pesach is only rabbinic. So all these reasons why it should be. And so the Rebbe explains that there's two different ways of leaving Egypt. There's one way of leaving Egypt, that Egypt exists and you get out of it. Yeah? So it's a struggle against the foe that exists. Like there's an opposition, you have to overcome the opposition. Then there's a point where there's no opposition. You're way above and beyond any opposition. You're just like moving forward in a positive way in growth and expansion, but not escaping from something else. And so the same thing is also, there could be a time, when you talk about Mashiach is saving us from exile, or Mashiach is the thing that exile doesn't even exist. It's like we're in a point where we're free. We're free. So free people are not thinking, you could say, I'm getting freed from my slavery, or I can say I'm a free person. If I'm a free person, I'm independently free. It's not free from something else. So that's what the Rebbe was talking. And then in the middle of this talk, it almost seems like it was just dropped in. The Rebbe says like this. Should I read you in Yiddish?
Mm.
So the Rebbe says, according to this, with this understanding, that there's a higher level of freedom where there is no concept of servitude at all. So you're not doing battle to go out of it, right? Like when Mashiach comes, when it comes, there's two eras of Mashiach. One is when the world will be a place of peace and serenity. No more wars, no more competition, no more jealousy. But that's no more that. Then comes the second era of Mashiach, when the resurrection of the dead is, when it's just a world completely of good. So that was like this. Now we'll also understand that in the times of Daniel, there was three prophets. The name was Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So, and who was the king at that time? Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar said to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and this is brought down, he said to them, that he said to them they should serve idols, and they didn't listen to him. And they said to him that, well, I'm not going to read every single word of it, but they said to him, you are a king over there. He said, didn't Hashem say that you should listen to the king? A verse in Ecclesiastes says, yes, as far as taxes go, we have to listen to you. But to serve idols, Nebuchadnezzar at v'kelev shavim. You and a dog are equal.
Mm.
So you and a dog are equal. So then the Rebbe says, what does this mean? You and a dog are equal. Why does first of all, Nebuchadnezzar in a weird way is given respect, because there's a verse that says that the temple will be destroyed by one who's a mighty person. So if the pasuk calls him mighty, it means a positive thing. And then there's the one time that when the prophet came and he stood up for him and he walked 3 steps, he gets rewarded for it. So Nebuchadnezzar is not somebody that, like, why belittle, like what does it say? Like, I won't listen when he sees a dog. Like, if even in common language you talk about a certain person, maybe it's a famous person or a politician, you say, I don't like the guy, he's like a dog. Like, what? It's not polite talk. So the Rebbe says, why do they why do you have to compare him to a dog? So the Rebbe explains this by quoting another medrash. Now listen to this one. This is talking about Yaakov. Yaakov was living by Lavan. Okay? And we know that when Yaakov wanted to leave Lavan, Lavan gave him a hard time and said, you'll take all the spotted sheep, the big spots, the small spots, the striped, the ringed, make a whole issue with him. Then this is Vayifres Ha'ish, that Yaakov became exceedingly prosperous. He had many flocks, maidservants, slaves, camels, and donkeys. Okay? And says Rabbi Shimon, what became prosperous? That it says in the pasuk, Allah Peretz Lifnehem, that an opening, a break was opened for him. Like when Yehuda had children with Tamar, the whole story when they sold Yosef, and then Yehuda, his sons died, and he had one daughter. He had one son. Tamar married the first son died, the second son died. Then she didn't want to give the third son, and Yehuda ended up having children with her, and he called one, and one of them struggled to get out, and then the other one tried to break through first, so they called one of them Peretz. And it says, so Peretz means to break through, like Ufarat, to break through. So in the Micha, it talks about Moshiach, says, Allah ha-Peretz lifneihem. The opening, an opening was broken in front of him. So this is what it says about so that word vayifreitz, the same word peretz, paratz, to break through, that Rabbi Shimon Abba says that an opening was open for Yaakov like the world to come. Okay. That's one thing. Then comes along Rab Abba Bar Kahana and says like this: Me'av etartin rivon shiva v'alafim masin eden havle lavinu Yaakovinu. That Yaakov, our ancestor, had 1,027,200 flocks. Reb Levi says, Reb Levi Omar, Shishim Ribui Klovim, 600,000 Klovim. That's plural for Kelev, 600,000 dogs. Rabbanan Amri Me'av Esin Ribai. Then comes along the Rabbanan and say, no, not 600,000, but 120,000 dogs. The lay pligi, they're not arguing. Why? So one says that for each one of the flocks, right? Because for each one of the flocks that, because Yaakov had 1,027,200 flocks. So they said, one said he had 600,000 dogs. One said he had 1,200,000 dogs. And they're not arguing. One said that there was 2 dogs for each flock. I'm not so sure how the math works here. Or one dog for 2 flocks, and one. I'm not sure how the math works here. But anyway, whether there was 1 dog or 2 dogs for each flock. Okay, so that's basically the thing. Right? So what is going on over here? Like, what does this mean? It says that Yaakov was exceedingly wealthy. So one says that he had a lot. How would he get the numbers? Not the point right now. He had a lot of flocks. The other one said he had a lot of dogs that watched the flocks. So the question is, so the point is that, I guess the idea being that if you have a lot of dogs, it means you have a lot of sheep. Okay, that's I guess somehow they come up with the number and they figure what is the number? Is the number for flocks or number for dogs? So if you say the number is the number of sheep that he had, like if the number is 1,000,000 sheep, that's one thing. But if you say it has a 1,000,000 dogs, that means 1,000,000 dogs is not 1 dog for each sheep. That means there are 1,000,000 flocks of sheep. It's much, much more. But so what do we see from that medrash? That when you talk about how many dogs a person has, it's not the value of the dog, it's that the dog serves to guard the sheep. Get it? So the same thing is also the idea when you say to Nebuchadnezzar, we're not going to listen because but what did they say to Nebuchadnezzar? They said, when it comes to matters of tax, listen to you. When it comes to serving God, you and the dog are equal. What does it mean you and the dog are equal? They're trying to say to him that you have a purpose. Your purpose is a secondary purpose. So you can tell us to pay taxes. So your existence is to make sure that the country runs properly, and we have to pay taxes and to support you and to, support the country. When it comes to talking about Yiddishkeit, talking about which God you're going to serve, you and the dog are the same. Remember that. Your function is secondary to provide what we need, but not to tell us what we should do. And this also we find in the Gemara that it says when the snake caused Adam and Chava to sin, Chaval al Shamish Godlush Avadim and Elam. Woe is to the fact that a great servant was lost from the world. What does that mean? That when the world was first created, the snake was going to be a great servant, and ended up that he messed up because he caused him to sin. All right. So the whole existence is a secondary existence. The existence of the dog is secondary to help the person what he needs. And then it goes, and the Rebbe goes on, and this is all parenthetic, goes on and talks about what's the point of this whole thing is that when a person is free, they can be free relative to servitude. Then they can be free and be free on their own. And the Rebbe connects this to learning Torah. When a person learns Torah, they should be like a free person. Because it says in the Torah, it says that Hashem gave the luchos to Moshe, and the words were charis al loiches, engraved on the tablets. But the word charis is spelled ches reish vav tav. So the Mishnah says that al tikra charis elecherus. Read it not as charis, but cherus, and cherus means free. And when a person learns Torah, they become who's a free person? Someone who studies Torah. So here the Rebbe is saying that when a person learns Torah, they should be free. What does free mean? And there it goes into this thing, which incredibly, you said in 1979, I think, oh, like, what's the big deal? But here you see it's 20 times more relevant. He says, for example, when the phone rings, it used to be that you're sitting in one room, you heard the phone ringing, you have to go and run and pick up the phone. So you should ignore the phone as if it's not there. You should be free from it. And then it goes on to analyze it even more. It doesn't mean that you don't hear the phone, because there are certain things you can control, like not to speak, but not to hear. You can't. You can't just stop your ears from hearing. Even though there's a story with the Rabbi Rashab, he was giving a farbrengen, and he was so into it he didn't hear what somebody was saying. But generally speaking, a normal person, he can't shut off his hearing. But the whole thing is, you can hear it but ignore it. And he says, for example, if he's sitting at a table and a child is playing with their fork, and the fork falls into the table, yeah, you say, and the guy's thinking about lofty thoughts. He's not going to be. If you ask me, I heard the fork drop, but did it make a difference to you? No. We continued his conversation, continued his thought. So the same thing also. When you hear the phone ring, you just ignore it. It's not like as if it would ring on Shabbos. Imagine the phone rings on Shabbos. When you don't think of picking it up, you would ignore it. It's like, okay, whatever. It's a thing. Not a problem. Not an issue. So the same goes when a person learns Torah, they should be so free from it, not that it exists, but it has no effect whatsoever on the person. Anyway, so that's that. So I think this is very powerful. I think it's amazing that I spoke to him, Mamish, on this Shabbos, in the middle of Pesach, and the Sikha was on Pesach. And we have one more indication here, and there's more in the book of the index book. There's more. I think so. We'll have in the coming weeks. We'll have more dogs in Torah, brought to you by our friend. I got to find the guy. I haven't seen him in the past few days. I have to tell him he's really famous now. Maybe we'll get him on the Pos-cast. He can talk about his dogs. He actually told me, when he told me they're Huskies. So I said, oh, Huskies, they race in Alaska. He said, yeah, he wants to race with them on the sled. Like they were schlepping the sled. Anyway, I didn't get into that with him because I wanted to come into shul to down with us. But I think that lesson is very powerful, that at v'kelev shom, you and the dog are equal, that your existence is there completely secondary to something else, and therefore it's not relevant. That's how we have to approach things in the world. Like it's there to serve us. So therefore it should always remain secondary. It shouldn't be something. And there's one guy, I will not mention his name, but see, I'm very sensitive. So I don't like to it comes to Yontif, I don't want to ask people, are you keeping Yontif, not keeping Yontif? Because, it's a big deal. Especially 2 days of Yontif, last week, 2 days and then Shabbos. To go ask somebody, are you, So whatever, don't ask, don't tell, I don't want to know. I heard one year, some kid told me, I come to the Seder. I said, no, I'm going home. And then he shows up for the second Seder. I said, oh, where were you last night? I said, I was home, like in New York or Chicago, I forget where. So I think to myself, oh, maybe I probably said it. I said, wow, that's a long walk. So that's why I don't want to ask. I don't want to find out what's going on. But this guy had, I can tell you that on Rosh Hashanah, I had a big discussion with him, not an argument, it was a discussion about how he shouldn't go to work. And for whatever reason, which is not important right now to discuss, it was, in his mind, it was very important. He couldn't take off, whatever, his new job, not important. And then, so now it came Pesach, I didn't even say anything. I didn't say anything directly. But I just speak about it at occasions in public, about the idea of being free means that you don't look, the world doesn't control who you are. You tell the world doesn't tell you. So if Hashem says, keep Yontif for 2 days, you tell the world, I'm keeping Yontif for 2 days. Let the world figure out how it's going to continue running rather than you figuring out how you have to go to work. And so this year, at this Pesach, he actually kept it, and I didn't say anything to him and say, oh, you're really keeping it? But he mentioned it to me about this idea about how it was a struggle. At some point, 6 months ago, it was a struggle for him. And this time he decided that he's going to keep the first 2 days, which is, because I know that when kids become more observant, that's something really hard. Like 1 day of Yontif is one thing, but 2 days of Yontif, that's like the second, especially when it comes Rosh Hashanah, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, 2 days beginning of Sukkot, 2 days end of Sukkot, Yom Kippur in between. Yeah, it's tough, but At the Kelev Shavim, you and the dog are equal. You have to keep that in mind. The world is but Hashem's dog. And that's what Achim Shapesach is telling us. The world exists. It's not doesn't exist, but it's there to serve us. It's not there to disrupt us. We should never let its existence be any obstacle to us. And that's true freedom. True freedom is being free to who you are. And who we are as a Jew, that's the essence of who we are. And we don't have to say it over and over again, but the world now knows who Jews are. Jews. So when you walk in the street and somebody screams, Jew, it's like, thank you. Thank you for announcing it to the world, so the world should know. Anyway, that's the story. So, yeah, I think this is a good message for upcoming Yontif. We have 2 days of Yontif coming. And once again, I want to thank you for insisting on keeping this as a weekly production. And the person I spoke to last week said he listened to it. He appreciated the anonymous shout out. I guess it matters. People care. Anyway, eating shmura matzah, even the last days of Pesach, any day of Pesach, the Rebbe says, any day of Pesach, eating matzah is a good thing. So today I took a piece of matzah to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, the old man, lives across the street. So I brought it to him. He said, oh, it's still Pesach. I said, it's still Pesach. He's left 3 more days. Eat some shmura matzah. Eat some shmura matzah. It'll serve your faith. It'll feed your faith and will bring you physical healing. So Hashem should bless every one of us. It should be a freedom, internal freedom, external freedom. The world should be free. The Eretz Yisrael should be free from all its enemies, and enemies that they should become peaceful partners and recognize that they, all of them, are just a bunch of
Dogs?
yes. And that's even meant in a good way. That you have a purpose, but you have to know your purpose secondary. So that's why, because the incredible things that the Medrash says, no, I'm going to tell you, what's the Torah telling us, the grains of Yaakov, how many dogs do you have? No, the dogs are there to serve. And that's an indication. So it wasn't a bad thing to have the dog. It was a good thing, because it was help, it was serving. Okay, so from this Pesach, we should merit to come to the ultimate redemption through Moshiach Tzidkenu.
Amen. With that, thank you so much for listening to episode 155 of the Pos-cast. Rabbi Shmuel Posner. We will see you next week.